What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the CRW podcast here for episode 204, our Arizona review and reaction after the Mountaineers, undefeated ever against the Wildcats, their first ever meeting, and WVU comes out on top. We got a win to talk about here. WVU gets the 31-26 victory on the road over Arizona, ends their losing streak that they were on there after losing 2 consecutive games. And joining me to help talk about this game, of course, my co-host. What's going on, Brad?
What up, man? We won a football game.
Hey, that's right. It's about time.
Yeah.
Happy to see it, man. Was happy to see it. One of those things I was pleasantly surprised about. And of course, got a shout out to you. You kind of saw it coming. You predicted it on the preview and prediction show. I was still, down being pessimistic, but I was glad to be wrong about this one.
Nah, man, I just felt good about it. Nico Markhill going down into Arizona, feeling warm. Um, Back home, West Virginia's historically played well out in the desert. So, and I think it kind of played out how I expected to play out with T Mac pretty much just being the whole team.
Yeah, that
Um,
guy's impressive.
yeah, and I would say that, nothing surprised me, which is good. I feel like Nico played the way I expected him to play, which is good. I expected him to play well, and I expected things kind of T Mac to go crazy, and that's what happened. You know what I mean? But we came out on the winning side of it, which is good.
Yeah,
But boy, did we
absolutely.
try! We tried to get rid of it though. We tried to give it away.
Yeah, I know, man. It was one of those things, even when the lead, no matter how big it got to, I think it was 31-13 there early in the fourth quarter. And even at that point, doing the, watch along that I was doing on the YouTube channel here on the CRW, I was telling people in the chat, I was like, I still, do not feel safe with this right now. I was like, Arizona, they're going to start, throwing the ball around and they're going to make some plays then. And I was like, we've already seen us have some collapses. So I wasn't, completely sold until that final, conversion that we got when we hit Jalen Anderson on that swing pass after
Yeah.
CJ was a little banged up. And, shout out to Jalen Anderson stepping up in a big moment there, getting the first down, hauling in that reception, and then, of course, outrunning the guy to get to the marker to seal the
Hmm.
win for West Virginia. And I think that was, a big moment for him because we think about last year, he had been a guy that had been involved in this offense for the past couple of years and then had those couple of moments last year that were really costly. One against Houston where he had a shirt could have been touchdown, then turned into an interception. And then a couple of games later, when he had a fumble, when he got counted upon, and like a third down scenario as well. So now a year later, hadn't been utilized too much this season, but finally gets called upon on the offensive side and makes a big play. That's a huge play in this football game that helped West Virginia get this win. So shout out to Jalen Anderson, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was very reminiscent of that missed touchdown interception that he let up.
Yeah.
It was big situation. Hadn't really seen him much, and all of a sudden you see him out there for a massive play. And last couple times, it was really not played out in his favor. So it's, I think Neil Brown said it was good to see him, get something positive because he's been a good teammate.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that,
Got to shout out
that
to him
was
for
nice.
that.
Yeah, big moment though, really big moment there at the end.
Yeah, and speaking of big moments and big plays that were, huge in this game, hey, how about the call there for the fake field goal? Leighton
Hmm.
Bechtel runs it in. They called that back in the bowl game. He came up short of the end zone. This time punches it in. West Virginia goes up 10-0. And of course that ended up being critical with what ended up being a 5-point win for West Virginia. So that, special teams play. I think West Virginia won the special teams battle in this game, and no bigger play than the Leighton Bechtel, the holder, taking off on the fake field goal going into the end zone.
Yeah, definitely beautiful. Caught me off guard, that's for sure, because
Me
I was
too.
full on sending a message in the chat, and all of a sudden I hear Jorden just say, "It's a fake," and I was like, "What? What?" And all I see was Bechtel running through the end zone, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" I was saying it was a nicely drawn up play. Like it was, you could tell it's something they expected to kind of see, and that they were going to take advantage of, and they did. That looks good. That was
Yeah,
fun to watch.
it really
That was fun.
was. It was surprising for me too. I think that's why I exclaimed so loudly like that when it happened because I wasn't expecting it either. But
Hmm.
it was a great call, and I think it goes hand in hand with something that's kind of a theme for this game for West Virginia, and that's that a lot of people that hadn't been counted upon throughout early parts of the season stepped up when called upon. We talked about Jalen Anderson, of course, a special teams play there, and involved in that special teams play was a new long snapper. Austin Brinkman was a little banged up. McGuire Moss took over and long snapped for West Virginia, and no real issues there involved on that play. And then you got to look to the guys on the defensive side that I think stepped up. Dantes Fagan getting his second career start at corner corner. And then how about KK Tarnu getting the start at Spear? Hated to see him get banged up later in the game, but forcing that fumble that really turned the tide for West Virginia early in this football game. That's on your defensive side. So your special teams, you had somebody step up that doesn't play often. Defense, you had it, and then on offense, of course, we mentioned Nico, but we got to shout out Johnny Williams as well. The offensive line didn't really have any issues in pass protection. Run blocking worked well for the most part. And I think, even that long CJ Donaldson, 20-yard touchdown run and 4th and 1 came, behind Johnny Williams there. So I think he did a great job filling in for Wyatt Milam. And the future looks bright even for the West Virginia offensive line. I can't lie about that. Glad to see some guys step up in this game.
Yeah, even though I will say the beginning of that game, man, that was some of the weirdest mojo I think I've ever seen going on. It just seemed like every snap somebody was jumping off sides, whether
Oh,
they threw a
yeah, that
flag on
first
it or not.
drive. Yeah.
And it was offense and defense. It's like they were jumping, we were jumping. I don't know what was happening. I don't know if it was 100 degrees and people were feeling antsy, but boy, was that just like the most nonsense you've ever seen in the first half.
Yeah, it was
First,
strange.
it just
I
could
couldn't
not
put
get
my
it right.
finger on it.
Yeah. And like you could tell that it was getting a little frustrating, but like I don't know if that's just like no new quarterback communication or what, but um, yeah,
It was something weird there early on for sure.
yeah. I don't know if you. I don't think you usually listen to the sound on when you're watching the games, but they even made comment a few times about Nico Markhill being taller than Garrett Green and being able to handle those bad snaps better because there were still a few that got a little
Yeah,
unruly.
I did
They were
notice
like,
that.
Nico doesn't have to worry about it as much because it's hitting him in the face instead of hitting him, foot
Having to
above his head.
jump up for it, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I think I did notice a couple of the snaps were a little off there still yet, but the only one I can really remember messing up a play was I think that I tried to set up a screen to Gallagher, and the timing got thrown off a little bit on that one. But for the most part, like you said, Nico may be in taller helping. It happened, but they didn't really affect the team too much this game. But gotta hope that that's not something that hurts us down the line as West Virginia tries to close out strong after another bye week. That's what we got coming up this week for the Mountaineers, a bye week, then final 4 games of the season. So it's 4 wins
Mhm.
for West Virginia, 4 losses, and 4 games remaining here. It's kind of where we're at this point in the season. But also, I did want to not forget to mention Zay Jennings. When we were talking about special teams guys, he had a hell of a tackle there on kick coverage for West Virginia. And then, of course, stepped up, played some snaps at Spear after KK Tarnu's injury. He's another guy that looks like he has a bright future. But, Brad, man, West Virginia goes to 4-4 on the season, 3-2 in conference play, heads into another bye week. A lot of different storylines we could talk about coming out of this game. Obviously, you know, could West Virginia end up having a similar record to what they did last year if they win the final 4 games? That's one thing you got to look at, and they would even have a better conference record than they did last year. So maybe we put the cart in front of the horse a little bit, but also the other side of the coin tells me that watching this game, one thing I kept reminding myself was, Arizona doesn't have a winning record. I still got to see Neil Brown do this against a team with a winning record. And, he'll get a chance after the bye week. Cincinnati will have a winning record. We'll get to face a team that has one of those. So maybe there's still some hope for Neil Brown at WVU. I know it's only 1 win, but how are you feeling as far as the status of the program now moving forward? 4 games left down the stretch that look like you should have a chance to win, some of those against some teams that you thought would be kind of, the easier part of your schedule going into the season. West Virginia now hits that final bye week and looks forward. What are your kind of thoughts on where things stand currently?
Yeah, I think I'm feeling optimistic. I think that really to this point before the season, you look at Pitt and Iowa State as pretty bad losses, right?
Yeah.
Now you look back at it, and I was thinking today, I was like, how many playoff teams do you think we've played this year?
Well, at least a couple, one way or the other, whether it's Iowa State and Kansas State or Iowa State or Kansas State, and then either one of Pitt or Penn State's probably getting in. So you're thinking you probably played a couple.
If maybe not both, right?
Yeah.
Like you could be looking at ACC
It could be
champion,
2 or
they could
3
be looking at a
potentially.
runner up. You could be looking at ACC champion and a runner up in the Big Ten that might get in, and then what could be one of the winners of the Big 12.
Yeah.
So um, that's some some pretty big teams right there, and Kansas State's got a chance to get in there. And um, it's just thinking about how tough that's been, right? And so looking forward, Cincinnati's your real good chance to come through and get that win that you really need to kind of get you over the hump. You know what I mean? I think that
Yeah.
if you can get Cincinnati, you get yourself some grace to maybe drop one towards the end of the season. Maybe not having to go 4 for 4 if you can beat Cincinnati. But that's still kind of where I'm at. Like I really want to see us like finish strong. I want to see some powerhouse. I think that Nico Markhill is definitely bringing in an energy note down to Garrett Green, but offense just looks more smooth when we can throw the ball. And a lot of those throws that Nico were making are throws that Garrett Green just can't make because he can't even see over his lineman. And what that's going to turn out to, who's going to start after that, I don't know, but it at least makes me feel good. You know what I mean? And I do think that Neil Brown's got an opportunity to, you know, I I think he needs to go with Nico Markio because I think that it's one of the things where people can look at it and say, okay, Neil Brown cares about winning.
Well, and it also would look better for him personally because then that would give him something to sell, Ren Baker on. Like, hey, you saw what I did with Nico. Keep me around. I'll have, me and Nico will have a good year together next year. Have a good, couple of years with him starting or whatever. So I personally would agree with you because I think just looking at the way that the offense looked, as you said, to the naked eye, but then also some things that the coaches have said throughout this season when they've been, asked about the offense, because we've all wondered, hey, where's the RPO game? Why is it just pretty much straight handoffs and, no really read options for Garrett Green even? It's just either design QB run, handoff, play action, drop back pass. And, one thing that we found out from the coaches is that Garrett Green's been struggling to make those reads on those read keys and those read options, those RPO plays. But they've said that Nico, does a better job of that. So you add that element to your offense. And as you mentioned, the throws, like the way that he was in this football game, 18 of 22, I think is the numbers. We'll get into the stats here momentarily. We'll take a look at stats and discuss our players of the game. But like you said, Garrett would have never probably had that high of a completion rating. And it's just, the tip of the iceberg. You got to think it's only his second career start, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And the thing that I like best about Nico is that, he's a winner. And I don't think you do lose, the explosive play that you could potentially get that Garrett can make in the ground game. But Nico can run the football well enough to, keep the defense honest, and you add something to the pass game and, gives you a look ahead to the future, get the fan base more balled back in, maybe especially if you can win, like you said, 3 or 4 of these games down the stretch with Nico. But I don't know. I feel like just knowing Neil Brown, he'll probably go back to Garrett Green. But do you feel like it's a definite, QB controversy right now? Well, I mean, what's your opinion there?
Yeah, it has to be, and I agree with you. I think that knowing Neil Brown, he's going to stick with Garrett Green because, in his opinion, Garrett's not done anything to lose the job, and I agree too that like we can't just bench Garrett Green. At least I felt that way a few weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like I was really defending Garrett Green because I'm like, you can't question what Garrett Green has done for this program and what he's done for himself and the kind of passion that he's brought to it. But also, at some point in time, when do you put the needs of the team over the needs of the individual? If Nico is just better fitted for the position, and like you said, I said first thing in was, we're found what we've been missing, which is big plays. Haven't found them this year, and
Yeah.
we've got a couple of people that can do it with their feet, but nobody that can do it with their arm. And now we do, and so that brings in a whole dynamic of people that can now do it on the outside. I mean, Hudson Clement, dude, I'm just going to keep saying it every week. 3 to 4 catches that are just massive every week, it feels like. And if you can actually start hitting some people in the hands, Traylon Ray, and getting your tight ends more involved and just getting the pass game more elevated, it just helps the team. And I think that was without a doubt proof of that. But you can look at it and say, hey, Arizona was beat up. Garrett Green could have done the same thing, but I don't know about that.
I don't know. Not
I
in
think
the
he's going to
same
keep him. I
way,
agree
I
with
don't
you. I
think.
think I think he'll keep him. I think he'll stay with Garrett Green, and then I don't know what that does to Nico Markio.
Yeah. I'm expecting him to go back to Garrett, but I mean, we'll see. I think there's going to be pretty loud outcry from the fan base to, play Nico for this back half of the season. But we'll see what happens with it. We'll keep an eye on it here at the CRW. But I do love what you mentioned there about the big plays as well with Nico, because we talked about being surprised by the fake on special teams. I think I was just as surprised and maybe even more excited about us. Coming out, we went under center early in the game with a couple tight ends, and we were always running the football out of that set. Then later in the game, we came back to it, and we used that to set up a play action deep shot, something we did a ton last year, and we just hadn't seen that this year. That was, our longest pass play of the season, the long ball to Traylon Ray for a touchdown, and it was so exciting to see that back in the offense. And Nico dropped it right where it needed to be in there in that long pass, and he showed us, like we talked about, a different, all different levels there. We've seen him, have great passes near the goal line and the red zone in tight, scenarios, like the touchdown to Hudson Clement. There was a throw over the middle to Hudson Clement where he really had to fire it in over a linebacker's head, pretty much went through his hands. And then, of course, we've seen him hit the deep ball as well. So Nico's shown, proven to be more consistent at all three levels, even some of those areas where Garrett struggles with, including, the little short games, the little dump offs to the running backs. I think that's, why we had so many receptions for our running backs in this football game, is because Nico's just even better at those little passes, like the 3rd and 7 that sealed the game. This is not to knock on Garrett or anything, but if that's Garrett, I don't know if that gets completed in the same way for Jalen Anderson to be able to run and pick up that first down. That's a pass that Garrett struggled with. So just those little things like that make me lean more towards Nico. And I think that you still could use Garrett, though. Garrett's still a
Mhm.
guy that can be explosive in your offense, especially the way that you were using Garrett, right? Prior to his injury, when you were using a lot of QB draw, QB run game stuff with Garrett, you could still use him there sparingly in the offense and have a piece, for him, have packages for him where there's a place for Garrett. I think even if you go with Nico, there's a spot for Garrett on this offense where he can still make some things happen and be a contributor to end, his senior year. But as you said, I fully expect Neil Brown to remain loyal to Garrett Green after the bye week, and hopefully Garrett comes out and has good performances and shows us up if that does be the case. But I think our passing offense, we can all agree, has struggled, and it kind of looked revitalized on Saturday.
Yeah, without a doubt. And to that point, with those short game passes, how much did that help Jaheim White and Rodney Gallagher get into
Yeah,
the flow of the game too? I
very much
mean,
so.
it helped Jaheim White easily get side to side and get him out in space, and that I think definitely helped out the tempo of our offense. You know what I mean? Like we actually saw us pick up speed a little bit because you're like, okay, we're just chugging along and getting the plays that we're expecting to get. And so that was I agree. I was like, man, Garrett misses those passes, and like you don't realize how big of an impact that has until you see them connect a few times.
Yeah, very much so true. And, I was just glad to see Nico, man. He outperformed even my expectations. I think he looked really polished. So shout out to him for playing well. And it's a good problem
Yeah,
to have, two quarterbacks that you don't know which one you're going to have as your starter fall in the bye week. But we'll learn more about that in the future, and we'll update it here on the CRW as it
somebody
happens.
gets paid a lot of money to make that decision, so
That's right. I'm
let
glad
him be
it's
the
not
right
me.
one.
Glad it's not on me, brother. But we're going to dive into the numbers here in just a second. But, final thoughts on the game here, Brad. The last thing I really want to say personally is just that kind of goes back to something that you brought up, West Virginia's, losses being to, 4 teams that are really good, probably multiple college football playoff teams in there. You've lost to 3 undefeated teams and to 1 team with 1 loss. But it also just brings me and made me think about, this, which I've never really in my time watching WVU football can I remember being 8 games into a season and not knowing whether or not WVU is a good team or a bad team, really. Because as you mentioned, the 4 losses to those really good teams, but also your 4 wins are over, an FCS team and 3 teams that are going to be at the bottom of the Big 12 standing. So it's really hard to kind of put your finger on this WVU football team right now. I think you just kind of got to stick with what you know. The pass defense isn't that great. There's some issues on the defensive side. You just got to hope your offense shows up and plays well, and you take care of the football and maybe get something to bounce your way like the turnover you did in this game. But I do think you match up better with the teams on the latter portion of your schedule. And it's crazy to think it, but, it's going to take games 9, 10, 11, and 12 to really find out where this WVU football team stands, because they still have a chance to, finish up in the top half of these Big 12 standings if they have a good close to the season. And, then you could be looking at, a 7-5, 8-4 team that has a similar conference record to what they had last season. And then you can't really, move on from Neil Brown. And, I think so. I'm more leaning right now it's not about what I want, just what I'm kind of predicting to happen here is I think West Virginia will keep Neil Brown for another year because I'm expecting them to probably play well in these final 4 games of the season. I don't know if they'll win out, but if they win 2 or 3 of them, I think West Virginia is going to keep Neil Brown. Ren Baker had his letter to fans the other day, which was talking a lot about the money troubles at the university, and I think that's obviously maybe some foreshadowing there involved with that. So I think West Virginia will keep Neil Brown, but you may have a scapegoat or two probably coming from the defensive staff. I think you will have to see some type of changes just because the outcry from the fan base. But that's just kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about right here is glad to see West Virginia get a win. Glad to see him come out and put on a good performance, especially with the injuries they were dealing with. There were some good coaching decisions, some good play calls in this game. So as much as I've harped on the staff, I do got to credit them for getting the performance and getting the win before a bye week. And they still have a chance now to show us in the final 4 games that maybe this is a good football team like they've been trying to preach to us all off season and then throughout this season. So it's kind of my final thoughts here on WVU getting the win over Arizona to move to 4-4 heading into a bye week. Brad, what about you here before we look at the numbers and then talk about some players of the game?
Yeah, I think going to defense, which it was easy to focus on the offense and everything they did right. Yeah, scapegoating is an okay term. I think that it might just be true accountability. I don't know how you have such non-progression, and like you can look at the defense and say that they've gotten a little bit better as the years got along, but still, this has just been too many years where defense has been a hindrance and not a help. And you can't help but think, you can blame Neil Brown as bad timeouts and his poor play calling and interesting decisions on fourth down and red zone offense. But, you know, you also give you a defense that stops an extra touchdown or two a game, and you're probably, or puts any kind of semblance of defense on the field in the last 3 minutes of the game, you're probably also winning a few more games,
Good point.
several games, honestly, at that point. So, um, it's something's got to happen there. And I've always been a big promote from within guy. I think Alan Jackson's great up front. I think that he would be a prime candidate to kind of, if he wanted it, it's a big responsibility to step up to defensive coordinator. But I think that Jordan Leslie and Shotton Brown have just got to go.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
think,
a true
unfortunately,
statement right there, my friend. I agree with it.
yeah, I just don't. We've not had any kind of good DBs. Our front lineup has always been great. Linebackers have been doing good. So you kind of keep those infrastructure that you keep a little bit of that infrastructure in place. Um, and you just find somebody that can actually teach a DB how to cover
Yeah.
and work on your communication. Whatever your communication is, throw it out the door, start over, um, and find you somebody that can teach some DBs.
Yeah. I like that idea because I do think that Coach Jackson, coaching the defensive line is one of the better coaches on that defensive side. So I wouldn't mind that decision. And if you do, choose to do that and promote from within maybe, and then just go out, hire 2 good coaches. One is a safeties coach, one is a cornerbacks coach, and then see what you can do with that. That's definitely an option to look at this offseason that I think West Virginia needs to look at to try and improve, things if they want to have a more successful 2025 even and moving forward. If the university does decide to keep Neil Brown, could be something that's mandated and happens. But kind of wraps up, just our overall thoughts on the game and kind of the current status of the program now is there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, more so than we thought now after West Virginia comes out with a win heading into this bye week to currently sit at 4-4 overall and 3-2 in the Big 12. But let's take a look at the numbers here as we wrap up our thoughts on the 31-26 win for West Virginia. We're going to look at the team stats, then we will dive into the individual numbers and we'll pick our players of the game on each side of the ball. Team stats here. I'll do a rundown here really quickly. West Virginia 16 first downs, Arizona 18. WVU 7 of 16 on third downs, but they were 4 of 4 on fourth downs. They've done a great job with fourth down conversions this season. Arizona 6 of 12 on third downs, 2 of 2 on fourth downs. Total yardage, West Virginia ends up with a 405 to 386 advantage. Passing yards, 198 for WVU. Arizona ends up hitting 308. So unfortunately, West Virginia does give up 300 yards passing. Yet again, been a bad theme for this season. WVU, though, good completion percentage, as we mentioned earlier. We'll talk more about that when we talk individual numbers. Rushing wise, though, West Virginia, 207 yards. Neil Brown gets over 200 yards. He has a really good record at WVU, and they hold Arizona under 100 yards rushing. West Virginia's rushing defense continues to be strong in the season. That's the one positive part you can say of this West Virginia defense, and that, of course, goes back to what we were talking about there with Coach Jackson doing a great job with the defensive line. But West Virginia averages over 5 yards per carry. The Mountaineers, a little bit heavy on the penalties, 7 committed, while Arizona commits a 5. And then the turnover battle, though, West Virginia finally gets a win in the turnover battle. Doesn't commit any themselves and forces the one turnover there. As we mentioned, the KK Tarnu forced fumble early in the game that really helped West Virginia have a time of possession advantage then, and then, of course, end up with one in the game there, 35 minutes to 25 over Arizona. Brad, any standout numbers there you want to discuss real quickly from the team stats before we take a look at the individual numbers?
I mean, not necessarily a standout, but one turnover is big deal. I say that fumble was massive. I say, and the non fumble that we had was massive.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, penalties were mostly up front on the line. So again, that's a little messy. And I think 204 yards were from T Mac on passing. So
Yeah, I'm not surprised, and it's funny though because I was talking to one of my friends before the game, and we were talking. He was asking me what I thought was going to happen, and I was talking about just judging by the way our secondaries played this season. I'm fully expecting T Mac to probably have like 300 yards, and after the game, I messaged him. I said, "Well, he didn't have 300, but he did have 200."
yeah, and a lot of that was just finding soft spots in the zone. But I will say that I did see some more life from our DBs. Like they seem to be a little bit better placement. At least playing a more impactful ball. I think that the issue is in the scheming. I think I like what I've seen out of the players. I think, but when you got Trey Lathan covering T Mac,
Twice.
sprinting down the middle of the field twice, when you know that he's a liability on coverage already, I just don't. I don't know how you can excuse that. Like that's
Well, because here's the thing: if Arizona, sees how you're a certain type of zone coverage you're playing and catches you in it and finds a way to scheme it up to where T Mac gets matched up with your linebacker in zone coverage once, okay, you got me. I'll tip my cap, but I'm not going to let that happen again. But then, just another series later, you let it happen exactly the same way. So that's definitely got to be on coaching right there, 100%, man. Can't be on anything else.
yeah, and I think you can honestly hear a little bit more of that in Neil Brown's post game conference. Where he's just talking about I can't remember the exact words. Go back and listen to it. Then to me, it put off a lot of what we got is what we got. Other things need to get better.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to try and do everything they can, but as one good thing you did point out there is it seemed like some guys were playing some, better coverage spots. Some, Jaheim Joseph should have had another interception, went right through his hands, and then Garnett Hollis, I saw him break up, a pass, and I was like, that's the best defensive play I'd seen from Garnett Hollis all season. Is one thing I mentioned during the live stream, and
Yeah,
was glad to see
and
that
12 and 13 were
guys
playing
stepping up.
some boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and other people were coming up making hits, making plays. They were at least getting involved. It felt.
Very much so. So, West Virginia's defense, not great by any means, probably not even a good performance, but good enough to get it done at least early on,
That
fourth
mentality of
quarter
bend don't
different.
break.
But
That's what we got to have with the defense this way. So
yeah, you're right about that, man. All right,
at
let's
this point,
take a
it's
look
just
at the
easy to break. There's lots of things breaking.
yeah. That's the bad thing is like sometimes it's bend but don't break for 3 quarters, and then that fourth the levee breaks and
Hmm.
everything's come rushing through.
Yeah,
That's how it's been, anyways. But held up just enough, and luckily the West Virginia offense was able to close it out. Because if the defense would have had to get back on the field, that's when I was worried. But talking about the individual numbers here now, let's get into some of these. Let's look at the offensive numbers, and we'll name a player of the game on that side. Then we will take a look at the defensive numbers. Nico Marchiol, as we mentioned, great job, excellent performance there, starting in the state where he played high school football. 18 of 22, excellent completion percentage there. 198 yards and 2 touchdowns, so 4 incompletions and 2 touchdown passes. He also added 39 yards on the ground. Jaheim White, 12 carries, 92 yards, had West Virginia's longest run of the season, a 55-yarder on a jet sweep handoff, and I love that they designed that up for him. And those are the people that you should be handing those to, Jaheim White, Rodney Gallagher, and I was glad to see them utilize that in this game. C.J. Donaldson got banged up towards the end, but 8 carries, 41 yards, and a touchdown prior to that. 20-yard touchdown run came on 4th and 1 as West Virginia scored 3 touchdowns on 4th down in this game, actually. Crazy stat. Rodney Gallagher, 4 carries, 21 yards. We mentioned Leighton Bechtel with the 14-yard fake field goal touchdown run, and Preston Fox got a carry that didn't net anything. Receiving wise, Traylon Ray, 2 big plays down the field, including the 54-yard touchdown reception to finish with 2 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown. Cole Taylor, 3 catches, 28 yards. Exact same stat line as Justin Robinson, who also had 3 receptions for 28 yards. 2 receptions, 20 yards, and a big touchdown for Hudson Clement. 2 catches for 14 for Gallagher. 3 for 10 for Jaheim White. And then Jalen Anderson, Traylon Davis, and C.J. Donaldson all share 1 reception. Jalen Anderson's probably the biggest out of those, as we mentioned earlier. But as we look at the offensive numbers there, Brad, who would you just select as your player of the game on offense as West Virginia gets the win? So we've got to pick some players of the game here.
Yeah, and I think that it's no question who the player of the game was. Leighton Bechtel. Absolutely phenomenal plays. Came in there, gets a big momentum changer, doesn't choke under pressure, turns around, holds a nasty snap, gets a PAT up and good. Leighton Bechtel, MVP, player of the game.
I love it because 100% when you were hitting me with that lead up, man, you got me because I thought for sure you were going to say this man right here, Ocho, number 8, Nico Marchiol. Since you didn't take it, I'll take it. I'm going to go with Nico as my player of the game in this one. Shout out to, my honorable mention is Johnny Williams. I was considering him as well because he stepped up in a big way with Wyatt Milam out. But I think I got to go with the signal caller, Nico, because as we said earlier, he impressed, 80-some% completion rate, took care of the football, ran the football just enough to keep the defense honest, got the ball to his playmakers. And I think that's what really impresses me here with the offensive numbers is how many different guys he spread the football out here too. We're talking, nearly double-digit receivers. I think there's 9 different guys here that caught a pass. So good job from Nico and very poised. And I said my favorite thing about Nico is that he seems to be a winner. Undefeated as a starter here at WVU as he gets the win. So gets my player of the game on offense, which flips us over to the other side, Brad. Let's look at the defensive numbers here, and we will select a player of the game on that side. Anthony Wilson finishes as the tackle leader with 8 tackles. And, I got to shout out TJ Jackson here. 6 tackles, 1 sack, 1.5 TFLs. Playing through injury. You can tell he's banged up, still gutting it out, and still one of the best defensive linemen in the conference and maybe in the country. Dantes Fagan, 6 tackles, getting the start there in place of the still injured Aiden Garnes. KK Tarnu, 5 tackles in place of the injured Aubrey Burks at the spear position, including a forced fumble. He did get a little banged up late in the game on his own. Trey Lathan, 5 tackles. Garnett Hollis with 4 tackles, which he shares with Reed Carrico and Josiah Trotter. Get a sack for Hammond Russell and a TFL for Hammond Russell. Half a TFL for Tyron Bradley and a TFL for Fatorma Mulba. And, of course, we mentioned the fumble recovery for Garnett Hollis off the forced fumble from KK Tarnu. Jaheim Joseph nearly had an interception, but not a ton of big plays, but West Virginia was getting their pass rush home several times. They were getting TFLs in the Arizona backfield. And, of course, you had the forced turnovers and some, key defensive stops that did end up getting West Virginia in the win in this game. But, Brad, if you're picking a player of the game on the defensive side, who are you going with?
Yeah, and I think TJ Jackson's a pretty obvious choice, but I'm going to go Anthony Wilson, dude. Like I talked about people stepping up there and giving a boom. He's one of them. I think that anytime you see somebody flying around the field, it's Anthony Wilson Jr. Like he's somebody that you notice. He's got speed, he's got aggressiveness, and he just seems to always be around the ball. So, yeah, for me today, it's definitely Anthony Wilson.
Yeah. And
Big
West
5
Virginia really needed him to step up and have that type of game with a lot of their leadership out on defense, a lot of their other veterans out there. And he stepped up and played a big role. And I love the way that he was out there just laying the lumber, man. He was delivering some big hits when he came in there, and you love to see it. He's not a guy with a huge frame, but he can really tackle well and did a lot of it in this game to lead the Mountaineers in tackle. So that's a good pick. I'm going to go ahead and give it to my guy, KK Tarnu, man. I want to go TJ Jackson, but he deserves the shout out. We gave it to him earlier there. both of us, kind of both our honorable mentions, I think. But I'm going to go KK Tarnu because similar reasons. Aubrey Burke's out for this game. KK Tarnu has to make his second career start, and that forced fumble proved to be a pivotal play in this football game because Arizona was, right on the West Virginia red zone, having a drive together when he forced that fumble that then allowed West Virginia to go up 10-0, which of course was a big, turning point in what ended up being a 5-point football game. And I think, he deserves the shout out as well. He was the guy that they thought was going to be a starter heading into the year, started the game at cat safety against Penn State, got benched after a couple of series, and it's been Jaheim Joseph there ever since. And he hadn't really gotten any playing time until here in the latter portion of the season once they moved him to Spear. And of course, it was a timely move after Aubrey Burks then was injured a week or so after that, and KK Tarnu has seemed like a much better fit at the Spear position and made a big play here as he got another start. So that gets my player of the game on defense. So Anthony Wilson for Brad, KK Tarnu for me, with a honorable mention to TJ Jackson from the both of us after he has 1 sack and 1.5 TFLs. But there's a look at the stat and our players of the game as we put a bow on the West Virginia win over Arizona 31-26. But of course, there was some other Big 12 action here in week 9 in the conference. Let's take a look here at the slate from this past week, kind of review the games and take a look at the scores before we take a look at the standings to wrap up the show here on episode 204, our Arizona review and reaction. But when we go back and look at the scores from Saturday, we had BYU taking down UCF 37-24 to remain unbeaten on the season. One of the
I was wrong.
one of
Actually, that was
only
one of the few ones I got right.
yeah, we got the BYU there, with the win. Steven would be proud if he were here with us in this episode. He called BYU, and they're one of only a couple handfuls of teams that are left unbeaten in college football right now. As we're getting into the last month of the season now, when we get to the next week, Baylor though with the win, that's one that I was wrong about. I thought Gundy would be able to get that win, but Baylor 38-28. Another good performance for the Bears. Dave Aranda with his back against the wall has really done some good things past couple of weeks. TCU outlasts Texas Tech in a tight football game, 35-34 win there in Fort Worth. Of course,
I
we
was wrong
talked
on
about
that
the
one.
Mountaineers coming up 31-26.
Right on that one.
Yep, got that one. Brad was right. I was incorrect on that one, but one I'm glad to be wrong about there. Moving forward, as West Virginia now heads into a bye week. Houston with one of the
Wow, I didn't even see
wins.
that.
Yeah, this is one I had to
Ooh,
talk about because 17-14 over Utah. And Brad,
let's go with
Utah
Houston.
is 1-4 in the Big 12. If we were right about anything on the CRW, it was Utah was not going to come in and
Ooh,
dominate, man.
bet their fans are awfully quiet over there on X
Yeah,
today.
it's funny. I haven't heard much from them lately. It's funny how that happens, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then Kansas State outlast Kansas. Like I said, Kansas State is the better team, but you never know what could happen in these rivalry games. Came down to the wire. Kansas State kicks the late field goal, then holds on for the 29-27 win in Manhattan to remain at the top of the Big 12 conference. And then, of course, our game of the week here in our Around the Big 12 segment this week was Cincinnati and Colorado. Cincinnati, West Virginia's next opponent. Colorado, one of the surprises in the Big 12 that's up in the top half of the conference. And Colorado outlasts Cincinnati at home 34-23. Some big plays there by Heisman hopeful Travis Hunter. Cincinnati heads into the bye week off a loss. West Virginia heads into the bye week off a win, and they will meet each other following their off week here this upcoming week. But those are the results, Brad. Let's take a look at the standings now after having seen those results and see kind of how things stand here as we get close to wrapping up this episode here of the CRW podcast. But we got to take a look here at the current Big 12 standings after 9 weeks here in the conference. BYU sits at the top, 8-0, 5-0 in conference, tied at the top there with Iowa State, who is 7-0 and 4-0 in the conference. Not far behind them, both at 4-1 in the conference, is Kansas State and Colorado. The Wildcats are 7-1. The Buffaloes are 6-2. And then, of course, rounding out here is what's crazy once you get here through 5 from the 5th seed in the Big 12 standings currently, all the way down here to the Mountaineers at number 8. You have 4 teams all sitting at 3-2 in the conference. 5-3 for TCU, Cincinnati, and Texas Tech. West Virginia 4-4. But for the Mountaineers, Texas Tech and Cincinnati remain on their schedule. So you can see how West Virginia could get up into the top half of the Big 12 standings here in the latter portion of the season still yet. Arizona State at ninth, Baylor at 10, Houston at 11, Utah at 12, UCF at 13, Arizona at 14, Kansas at 15, and Oklahoma State at 16, still surprisingly winless in the Big 12 at 0 and 5. Don't think anyone had that on their bingo card, but Brad, any thoughts on the results from this week or the current Big 12 standings as things currently sit here in the conference?
Yeah, I really don't know what the schedules look like, so I'm really curious how that top four is going to shake out, and I think that that's going to let me know how important this next four shaking out is. But man, when you're sitting behind two of the people on your schedule, if you beat them, what are you going to do in the standings? Are
Yeah.
you gonna climb the standings?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
it's not over yet.
Is
So I
this your
feel like
chance?
it's the Lloyd Christmas moment right here. So you're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah. So you all you got to do is win. That's the one thing you got to do.
Yeah. Just win, baby. That's what the Mountaineers have to do if they want to get back up to the top portion of those Big 12 standings, and they'll have plenty more opportunities to do that following a bye week. But for now, at least we get to go into that bye week with the sweet taste of victory and not having to, linger on the taste of defeat for an extra week. Instead, West Virginia gets back on the winning side of things, goes into the bye week at 500 overall, and with a winning record in the Big 12 conference currently at 3-2. We've kind of given our thoughts in this game. We've talked a little bit about the Big 12, but any final thoughts here, Brad, before we get ready to wrap up episode 204 here?
Nah, man, I'm excited to hear what Neil Brown has to say after looking over it all. I'm glad to get into a bye week, even though I feel like we're probably not even crawling into it at this point. We're kind of just um, laying where we're at.
Yeah.
Let's get healthy. Let's see what yeah, really, it's a bye week. I don't know what to expect against Cincinnati, but better be ready for it.
Well, I
Gotta
think at
win.
least it's another well-timed bye week too. I feel like the
Very true.
last time we said that, but this time West Virginia's even more banged up. Got a lot of things going on, so they can get a lot of guys healthy, hopefully, and be
Mm.
as close to full strength as possible heading into that game against Cincinnati, which is going to be one to keep an eye on. I can't wait to discuss that one because Cincinnati has a winning record on the season, and that'd be big for Neil Brown to get a win over a team with a winning record, and maybe them and Texas Tech, I think are going to be his, he's going to have a couple opportunities in those final four games still yet. So as bad and, as far off the Neil Brown train as everyone is and currently was and probably still is, I guess I should say, he's going to have a couple of chances to maybe get people back on board here in the latter portion of the season. So it's going to be interesting close to the season for WVU, 4-4 heading into the bye week with 4 games remaining. Coming up for us on the slate, obviously WVU's off this week, but we're still planning on
Mhm.
releasing a podcast episode in the latter portion of the week here, just so we can talk about the upcoming Big 12 games. We'll kind of maybe discuss some stats, just do a little bye week babble and a Big 12 preview. So still be on the lookout for another podcast episode from us coming later in the week. Don't know if we'll do a live stream this week. That's probably going to be up in the air, but we will be back with that next week, though, as West Virginia gets back to another game week after a bye week this week. But Brad, that's pretty much all I got here, man. We've discussed the game. We've discussed some Big 12 stuff. Any final thoughts here before we close up shop here as West Virginia heads into this off week?
Nah, man, let's wrap her up.
That'll do it. That'll do it here for us here at the CRW podcast then. Been a lot of fun crafting this one. Hope you guys have enjoyed taking it in, whether you watched it on YouTube. If you did that, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. That helps us a ton with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe here for a ton of Mountaineer football content throughout this season, and of course moving into the off season as well. And if you listen on the audio side, we appreciate that also. You can find us on any podcast platform: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, you name it. Just search Country Roads Webcast and leave us a rating there. That really helps us on that side. And shout out to the people at WVSportsNow.com. Great content over there, and we appreciate them hosting our episodes on their website as well. West Virginia going into the bye week off of a win here, 4-4 overall in the season, 3-2 in Big 12 play, and hopefully a great final 4 games of the season, and maybe we can have a positive end of this season still yet as Mountaineer fans. That's what we'll be hoping for. Know you guys all are throughout Mountaineer Nation as well. But we'll talk with you guys more about this season here in the near future. For my co-host Brad, as always, I'm Jorden Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.
If you really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those